All right. With so much thinking going on in this space today, I thought I'd start by taking a little moment for us to refresh our personal hard drives, our brains. So come with me and just ground your feet to the floor a little bit and take some deep and intentional breaths. I want you to navigate to your mental browser. Notice all of those open tabs. Game of Thrones, Vikings, your list of things to do, your worries, and I want you to close them one by one. Take yourself to your inbox and mark everything as read. Move it to the trash and then empty that trash can. Log off from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram, from Pinterest, from LinkedIn to Snapchat, whatever your flavors are. Put your mind onto flight mode for the next 10 minutes. I don't know about you guys, but I really miss sometimes my pre-internet brain. When was the last time you spent more than 24 hours off the internet? For me, it was more than 5 years ago when I took myself 6 hours out of Sydney to a farm to ride horses at Jillaroo School. Jillaroo School is basically a digital detox. It was for me an accidental digital detox because when I got there, I realised there wasn't actually any internet. I freaked out for a moment and then I realised it was pretty damn hard to tweet from the back of a galloping horse, and I found freedom in this new space of disconnection. So for 10 years, or 10 years ago, I was actually a geography teacher, and the use of ICT or computers in the classroom at that time pretty much it just involved taking some clip art and popping it into your assignment on rainforests. Not very exciting at all. By the time I completed my retraining to become a school counsellor, the education revolution, or the digital education revolution, had totally taken off. Kids' IT skills were phenomenal. They were intuitive, they showed no fear, they tinkered, they got in there and they worked it out with very little instruction. Meanwhile, some teachers had this real resistance to change and this sense of their possible obsolescence. Welcome to Generation Screenager. Now, you've probably heard lots of versions and lots of names for this new generation. But as we all know, this is the first generation of kids who are actually growing up with this technology, really early digital footprints. 97% of teenagers are online daily. I don't know what the other 3% are doing. 24% of them self-report that they're constantly online. For me and for many of you, the first 2 decades of my life didn't have a daily dose of digital. Yeah, we grew up and it wasn't until I was about 21 I got my first computer. Now, for many of us, we'd hardly go an hour without checking in. Yeah. I could actually feel my brain changing, the way I thought about things, the way I paid attention. So it got me to wondering, if this was happening to me, what would a toddler on tech look like? What would a teenager's brain on tech look like? I'd noticed too the rise of this digital detox, and before we had Michael's example of Lord Howe Island, selling the idea you can come to this place and disconnect. There's also lots of charity months you might notice popping up, all with different names but the same slogan: disconnect to reconnect. So if we were overdosing on technology and we were craving this balance back to our analogue lives, I was really starting to think about how we could flip this conversation rather than from the toxic and the dieting to something a bit more positive. It's now more than 20 years since Dr. Kimberly Young first started talking about this idea of internet addiction. Still, and back 20 years ago, the internet, what was it? It was just an elaborate post-it note system for a bunch of nerds, right? There really wasn't very much on there. You couldn't really even Google yourself at that point. So still, 20 years later, we don't know that internet addiction actually exists, and we definitely don't know how to define it. There is some movement to try and understand it from the point of view of internet gaming disorder, but there's actually no consensus on what internet addiction would actually look like. Can you really be addicted to a bunch of internet-connected wires that transmit information? Probably not. I would guess that actually this is about a deeper compulsion. So as humans, we're wired to connect. In fact, Web 2.0, which is that social media connection, collaboration, share, like, comment kind of world, that's designed specifically to help us connect. So it does this really broadly, but the question about that is whether or not it does it deeply, and whether we can really replace our online communication and connections with what we've come to know and have had generations and millions of years worth of connecting IRL, that's in real life. So consider, instead of talking about technology in terms of being addictive, let's consider how much more interesting and positive and actually more accurate would be to talk about it from the point of view of being highly engaged, super passionate, deeply absorbed, and even possibly enchanted. We'd not consider an avid reader an addict. We don't see the kid in the corner reading the book and go, whoa, look at that book addict. So why is it when we use screen activities, they suddenly become sort of negative and dangerous? If technology and the internet was addictive, let's just pretend for a moment it could be addictive and it was dangerous then. Why weren't we talking about preventing these issues of overuse, of problematic internet use? We know that fad diets and detoxes don't work in the long term, okay? Sorry 5-2 fans, sorry paleo people. In the long term, 95% of people don't actually maintain weight loss or have any better well-being outcomes from those. Short-term behaviour change does increase awareness around an issue, but what it doesn't do is help those behaviour changes stick in the long term. So this is why I flipped the conversation to digital nutrition, about it being a more positive and sustainable relationship with technology, just the same way we'd consider, hopefully, our relationship to food. And that's our relationship to eating, not just what we eat, but why we eat, when we eat, and what triggers our eating behaviours. We carefully, I hope, select the inputs, knowing exactly how those inputs might impact the outcome. I'm applying the knowledge that we have, there's been such an increase in the conscious eating movement, so I'm trying to apply that, the food pyramids and the healthy eating plates, into what we do in our online activities. So rather than just thinking about the food items, whether it's a hot dog or a pineapple, digging deeper into looking at what those nutrients of our online activities are. What are the proteins or the sugars or the vitamins and minerals that are actually inherent in those activities? There's two aspects to digital nutrition. One I expect is going to be, and this is a work in progress, the social and emotional skill development. So that's things like willpower, bit old school, hey? Willpower, motivation, the ability to regulate your own emotions. Now, I see these things as part of what, as humans, we need to learn to get better at, and part of how we can apply that to our online lives as well. There's a little side note to all of those skills. Parents have a really big role in that, and parenting is really, really important in this space. The other aspect is evaluating the social and cognitive actual ingredients within the activities that we do. For instance, games. You might have heard about games and kids playing games on the internet. Anyone heard about that? Yeah? Okay, cool. So I've taken my inspiration from twin sisters who are also incredible TED global speakers, the McGonagall twins, Jane and Kelly. So Jane is a game designer. She wrote this incredible book called Reality is Broken, and she's of the strong belief that the power of problem solving in games can actually save the planet. Kelly, just as incredible, is a clinical psychologist, a mindfulness expert, and she talks and writes a lot about willpower and the positive use of stress to motivate our behaviours. So as I say, digital nutrition is a work in progress. What happened here, I was actually in Bali last year and I heard about the New South Wales Premier's teaching scholarship. And I was thinking about my relationship to technology as I sat by the pool in Bali and I Instagrammed, my toes by the pool and all of those sorts of things. I thought, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? And we've heard again this morning about that need to connect and then be validated. And that goes back to, again, a lot of what people are talking about today around a hunter-gatherer society and the fact we really need to be a part of that community and to be involved in order to share the resources. We're all about sharing the resources. If you're ostracized and you're an outlier, you don't get to share the resources. So we're actually primed for a lot of this. So I won this scholarship. Cool, hey? And what that means is for 5 weeks, in 2 weeks' time, I'm travelling across America and I'm talking to experts in this field, including Dr. Kimberly Young herself. So I get to explore my passion, which is to try and understand this. And it's just going to be an incredible journey because I can't actually find anyone in the world looking at prevention of internet addiction, presuming that internet addiction is real. So I've got a bit of a problem there, but that makes the adventure a bit more fun, right? So very quickly, let's have a little look at screen-based media use. The American Academy of Pediatricians, they have guidelines on screen time. At the moment, those guidelines are no more than 2 hours for kids over 5. I can't quite see your eyes boggle. But in a lot of classrooms, that 2 hours would be used up by recess. Yeah? These guidelines were set in 2001. Does anyone remember what they were doing on the internet or with computers in 2001? Yeah? This was the BF era, before Facebook. All right? For me, my computer, I thought it was so massive. It had a 10 gigabyte hard drive and the monitor was as deep as my desk. It was like literally this huge thing. Okay? So these guidelines are prehistoric, and most of you would agree virtually impossible given the ubiquity of technology and the fact that we're expected to use it in learning, right? Schools are giving out laptops. Some schools market themselves and will give your 5-year-old an iPad, all right? So time as a metric here is just too simplistic. I think we actually have to look deeper and look at the vitamin content of what we're doing and the recommended daily intake of some of these different activities, as well as the developmental level of kids. A 5-year-old's needs for their learning, very, very different to a student who's about to sit the HSC in Year 8 because they've accelerated, because they've been identified in a gifted and talented program or something like that. So we really need to take into account the individual nature of what we need to do online. Not all screen time is created equally, and to compare some of these activities is like comparing by time, is like comparing the weight of a fried Mars bar with something of the same weight of a fruit salad, right? It just doesn't make sense because of what's actually underlying the activities we're doing. You might be playing a very violent antisocial game, or you might be engaging in really deep learning activities by creating your own video or different, actually creating something from scratch rather than just interacting with something that's there. So how do we sort the candy from the kale? Now, yes, I know that's broccoli and not kale, but it's a pretty good picture. There's 1.4 million options in the app supermarket. So we have to get parents to try and shop in the health section and keep away from the candy and the chips. There is a problem of credentialing these apps because basically to get an app in the App Store, all you need to do is call it educational, pop it in there, and they'll check that the specs actually work and it functions, but no one's going to ask you about your pedagogical background. No one's going to understand whether or not you get the developmental needs of a younger child. What we need then is a trusted review source. Just like the nutritional label on the back of food, it would be really handy for us to come up with a way of credentialing some of these things so we can really check in what the values of them are. Indian alternative games have been overlooked as sources of digital nutrition, just the way that kale was in the 90s. You might know that before 2013, kale's biggest use worldwide was just to line the salad bar at Pizza Hut before it got this amazing title of superfoods. So they contain rich narrative, pro-social themes, they embed literacy and numeracy and also happen to be super fun. Paradoxically, they're named the serious games movement, and they have serious ability to revolutionise how we think about games and gamers. So really quickly, we're going to have a look at 2 examples. This one is really cool. It's called Skip a Beat, and it's games with heart. What you do is basically you put your finger over the camera, use your other finger to control the little frog guy who jumps around. And the idea of this is you actually use your heart rate and your heartbeat to control the game. So this biofeedback and the ability to tune in and develop your awareness towards how your body responds to different activities is really amazing. I tried it the other day. So you have to do these ones, right? And then it's telling you also hop on one leg, now change legs. So there's a whole bunch of really complex brain stuff going on where you corpus callosum and all these other big brain words that I could use to tell you about it. I really like this one. Games with heart. Here's another little example. So in games, you don't always have to drive around, steal cars, and kill prostitutes. You can, for example, sometimes play as an innocent civilian in a city under siege. This War of Mine is this game, and it's just won an award at the Games for Change Awards Festival in New York. Again, the interest in this and why I think it's amazing is you have to actually gather allies, you have to find your resources and play from the point of view of millions of people who are in war zones across the world. This builds an incredible empathy and understanding. So these are just a couple of the hundreds of indie games that you can find when you know where to hunt. Like with the Australian film industry versus Hollywood, indie games are dwarfed by those huge name console games that get such negative media attention. The Digital Nutrition Cookbook won't be ready anytime soon, but hopefully today I've given you a new framework for considering your online consumption habits, and possibly you'd be keen to try new options on the digital menu at lunchtime. Thanks.